practice writing a paragraph on one of these instances of repetition. So I want you to decide as a group which one you're going to write about. I'll give you 15 seconds now. Which instance of repetition would you like to write about in the paragraph? Decide as a group. It can be anywhere in the whole paragraph.
Oh yeah, that was.
So it can be the one you discovered from today. It could also be one that you discovered from last time, like the repetition of the word little, the repetition of the when you, anything you want. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Anytime. You don't have to ask.
I don't really care what you grab, but let's make it a good one that we at least know. So don't make it a hard one that we can't even pronounce. That's our goal.
Okay, does anyone not have one chosen yet? Just choose one, super quick. Put finger down and choose it. You could write about any of them. Okay, so we're gonna write paragraphs together. I am going to write one as you are writing one. I'm gonna write it up here on the board about this one paragraph. I'm gonna find one instance of repetition that I'm going to explain in the paragraph. So we're gonna practice paragraph structure. Everyone is writing the paragraph on their piece of paper, but you all should have almost the same paragraph. If you wanna change up a couple things, I don't mind, but you're writing it together. So you're trying to like use a hive mind to come up with the best paragraph that you can. All right, so let's say the first thing that you need to write is a topic sentence. And your topic sentence needs to include the language choice you will be discussing. And by that, I mean you're going to label it. So you're going to say something like MLK uses anaphora, or MLK uses epistrophe, or MLK uses antithesis, or MLK repeats the word little over and over again. You're going to label it something in that topic sentence. And then the second part of the topic sentence, you are going to say, to what purpose? Why is he doing this thing? You're going to try and summarize that in a single sentence. So MLK uses anaphora in order to centralize an experience that would not be familiar to his wide audience. There we go. So I've got there the purpose, the reason why I think he's doing it. You have two choices for this. You can talk about how it's going to affect the audience and be effective rhetoric, or you can talk about how it adds to the argument and get to the audience later in the paragraph. You choose what you think is going to be the most important to make the main idea of your paragraph. Okay, try and write a topic sentence then in your groups. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh. So you guys, if you are watching at home, you're just going to have to scroll forward when I give them time. Or what I would do is I would just use this time to write your own topic sentence. And then when you finish, go to the next part where I'm talking. I think that's going to be most useful because I'm not going to be uploading separate videos anymore.
We know through people
Stand by life.
I don't know. This is
Maybe the
Okay, does that mean everyone has one?
No.
Oh, sorry, you were just pausing to think?
yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, so I just heard, that's okay, keep going. You're disagreeing?
No, we've all decided to take a break at the same time.
I see, the hive mind decided we need a break right now.
What's that word? It starts with a C. Yeah.
Crackerjack.
Oh, hi, Brian. Holy crap. That was scary.
If you don't have a clear name for the language choice, you can just describe it, right? So like I said, you could say just repeating the word little, or repeatedly, like repeating different personal instances of discrimination. You know, you can just describe it.
Oh, yeah, you just put. There we go.
And I think
So
just
far,
show
we
us
have-
what it's like before we get to
Is that a?
Great.
Or, it's the same as what about this? Experience is a good system. Or to convey, like,
I caught the slow pace, trying to get my contract.
You know, I think one of his main purposes behind the market and all this stuff, to try and get the people who have not been able to speak up. So the sentence is, the oppressor will not be oppressed anymore. And that's like what his entire purpose is, trying to get the oppressed not to be oppressed. Oppressed by themselves anymore, because they're also oppressing on themselves. So that's the word. One thing is kind of saying we won't be oppressed anymore. Make sure that people aren't oppressed anymore. It's kind of the same thing. We have been oppressed. Big brain legislation.
That's better with how I wrote it. I said, using the antithesis, Martin Luther King starts the paragraph by expressing or conveying whatever is this and this. So I know
Reiterating.
Yeah, I just don't want to write the same thing.
How do you spell reiterate? Now people might ask, how do you get the AP language arts without even knowing how to pronounce it?
I don't know.
But I'll tell you something. At least I knew it was a word.
That's where you say, I spend my time.
People
I
always
don't know.
ask,
I don't like.
how did you get into language?
Tell that
How to pronounce me or right? Well,
Reiterate or springs.
Okay, how many of you guys are now done with your topic sentence? Okay, here's where you go for the next part. If you are still working on it, still work on it. But next, you get to that introducing your quotation, right? So what you want to do, it doesn't really matter in these pieces of rhetoric that are fairly short, what page number it's on. Like, it does matter, but we're going to get to all those citation things. When I say introduce the quotation, I mean that in a more substantial way. So it might be something like, after addressing the concerns of the clergyman, MLK writes a long sentence to explain why his community's interests are more urgent. So in this case, I am kind of like giving just a tiny summary. Like the extent of my summary of the letter is he addresses the clergyman's concerns, right? You could do a little bit more than that if you wanted to, if you think it's going to be relevant to your topic sentence. I thought for my topic sentence, it could be kind of short. You also, if you're talking about like the quote that's like justice too long delayed is justice denied, then you're probably going to want to introduce it in a different way. I've set mine up to be about 2 different experiences, so that's why I'm introducing the quote this way. If yours is about injustice, you'll probably want to talk about what he's talked about with justice so far in the text. Am I confusing you by this, or is this making sense? Not really. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're situating the quote within the context of the rhetoric. And the only way to do that is by telling me just a little bit about what has been going on in the rhetoric so far. And you want to do that in a way that's going to be relevant to your whole point in the paragraph. So you're kind of picking and choosing what context you're giving. Yeah, Cooper.
Summary, you want us to add a little bit of context instead of just name dropping.
Exactly. So if I had just shoved the quote in right here, they wouldn't have had any background for like where in the text this quote is occurring. And part of what makes the quote powerful is the structure. So I want to give some context to introduce them to that quote. Nathan?
I'm assuming you want us to do that and then write a quote, and I'm assuming that does not have to be this big long sentence.
No, and I'm not going to, and I'll show you how to kind of embed quotes after this. Right now, I just want you to write 1 or maybe 2 sentences that introduce the quote you're going to use. Okay, go for it.
So I think you can't find the video. 77 years old.
I was focusing on my and all of a sudden I see that.
Okay, so maybe that's just to now, just to
I used to switch to close on
Like computer. To convey it.
So the first one. So.
Make it feel like
Yes.
You know, one of the things that I think this sentence conveys is that not only
That'd be kind of like-
chosen them for the 340 years, and we can put that in there too. But I think that people also included themselves
Yes.
read this speak out. So I think it's yes, it's
Right.
if you want people to get out start being still listening to the sentence.
But I think that in order to short sentence slow pace, you might want to introduce right here maybe the clergyman's inside, maybe even more than I did in mine.
Yes.
Because the clergyman is much the same. Wait, like you're good. I mean, 50 years, things don't turn out right, you know. So introduce that concept of that. Wants to introduce response to their kind of last. Okay, so you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's like trying to see.
So let's see what you're. We can start the same way, but.
How would you introduce this if it were to be the boss and kind of you would introduce it coming onto the stage? How would you introduce it? I would use this as anti-discussion sheet as used to curate tournament. Its name will bring fear into your children's faces. The quote happens to be.
I was gonna say that. I was gonna be like, I'm okay. It starts out this paragraph by immediately.
Alright, sounds like you guys got that.
You don't get it.
Find us, can I see yours?
Yeah.
Like 60%. Yes, that's 10 points. It's a call to action.
Is to say, and this is
We don't get too repetitive because we already said MLK starts the paragraph. So by saying we can get into it, I think we should just say something like, we could just say something like he states.
kind of good.
I just said
Kind of doing
MLK uses this after paragraph.
That's good.
Or in here or here?
Right, two, a bold, white and black.
Oh, we should do it while. We should do it. Use like while the clergyman
This, why would I
MLK.
And then that's bossing right too. That's bossing introduction. Hang in mic, you're on the right track. Just so you know that I'm gonna have to speak just
So you're on the spot. Are you brilliant or not?
Well, my box.
Is it like, so the antithesis creates what about adding?
it's on my list, so you know, and it just depends on. Wait, what do you mean? I'm just saying.
Imagine having a box.
So it's strong flow.
But the thing is,
That'd be fantastic.
speaking like what you're doing, like,
Right?
I know, like, 30-year-old.
Yeah. And I don't, but it, yeah, it works.
You lived through.
Okay, I know some of you are done with this part, so we're gonna move on to the next part.
We have like a minute and a half.
No, you'll go back to it. Oh, yeah. So here's the instruction for the next part. If you're still working on the last part, keep working on it. But the instruction for the next part is actually using your quotation. Now, this one's tricky, and it's, I mean, it works really well for explaining this. So you do not, and you should not, include the entire book-length quotation there, right? If you're talking about the long sentence. What you want to do is pick out the parts that are going to serve your interest. You only really want to quote the stuff that you are going to be looking at very closely. So that means you're only quoting the stuff that you're actually going to pick apart the language. So I would say something like, more interest in a, wait, did I already say a very long? Yeah, the long sentence, right? The long sentence to explain this community's interests are more at the beginning of each clause, each major clause in the sentence. Dr. King writes the words when you followed, I won't do the dots, when you, comma, followed by a an anecdote about personal instances of oppression. By anecdotes. Okay. So instead of including the entire long quote, I'm really only including the anaphora by saying when you. And I'm saying it's at the beginning of clauses. So you only need to quote the stuff that is important to the argument you're going to make. If you're saying that he repeats the word little, though, you're not going to only want to say the word little because the context there is important. So you would want to include enough of the quotation that you really have a lot to dig into. Does that make sense? So I'm going to make my whole paragraph is going to be about this phrase. I'm not going to get into anything else there. Yeah, anything.
So in this quote specifically, do we have to say like, oh yeah, do we have to quote the part of the paragraph that is repetitive and say this is the part that is repetitive?
What's your strategy for yours?
Yeah, we're doing the antithesis in the first.
The oppressed part,
yes.
Oppressed versus oppressor.
So,
So you're asking, do you need to include only the part about oppressed and oppressor, or can you include more?
Oh, I'm saying do we have to can we say he talks about the oppressed and the oppressor, which backs up his argument this way, or do we have to say he talks about the oppressed and the oppressor, which is a form of do we have to say this is a form of repetition?
Oh, you don't necessarily have to after your topic sentence. Labeling it in your topic sentence should be enough, and then you could say, you could be more specific, not just what antitheses do generally, but more specifically in that instance. Yeah, and for yours, I wouldn't just use the word oppressed and oppressor, I would use a longer quotation. Yeah. Okay, does that make sense? All right, try and write the quotation now.
So I think what if we take out the period and say, he uses this as a call to action to a white and black audience, saying that freedom is never voluntarily given, and that it must be given by the oppressor.
Or do you want them?
No, you can make them one. Yeah.
They okay, right. We're good.
Say again. Say again.
So, in my lesson, and I think you guys know, he uses this as a call to action to a white and black audience. But if we put a comma after that, say, by saying freedom is never voluntarily given, and it must be demanded by the oppressor. Or oppressed. Okay, well, we can do it for second sentence.
Yeah.
I just don't want to say, keep saying, MLK starts, MLK says. By saying, like we said, says, and saying.
Are you guys still working on that intro quote thing?
Well, I just.
Oh, okay.
First off, someone says this Martin Luther King uses
Close call to action to both white and black audiences. Also, and to think, then you could just say he writes.
Yeah.
And then
using the
because I can get stuff so far.
Okay, bro.
That's the exact same thing.
What if we how does one know what freedom is? That depends on my entire life. They need to know what freedom is. No longer be oppressed. And to stop the oppression. And to find out what your rights. Blah, 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 blah.
As a way to intro the quote, right, Ben? Yeah, I like that idea.
The oppressor does not know what it is to be oppressed until speak up. Even then, he still doesn't know. Either way, I don't think that's one thing.
They succeed.
Words, what words?
Each major clause of the word
The oppressor does
succeeded
not
by
know what it's
a
like
personal
to experience, and therefore does not know when to stop. End of story. Oh, that's hard.
You can say to be put through a painful experience without even knowing what true freedom is. How could you ever expect anybody to stand without the faith?
Wrong with that? Yeah, it's not right. The difference Did I just quote Shakespeare?
Freedom is something that must be. Yeah, that's, yeah. Demanded is a much.
Oh, no, it was Mark Twain. Okay. Slightly better.
So, like, what did you say? The king writes that,
Freedom is something.
Dr. King writes that through painful experiences, painful experiences, in quotes.
So do we do through painful experiences that they're voluntary was that's
the wizards.
All right, entire culture there.
There's so many ideas. Like, essentially, it's like, we got this,
I will, I wanted to put that first quote in there too, so I said Dr. King writes that through painful experience, through, so yeah, society has learned that freedom is never voluntarily given, in quotes, and must be demanded.
be more moderate and long term.
Because I just wanted to throw that first word in there, but.
Or
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
So
If you are, at some point, your body is direct. So at some point, you'll need to use oppressor and oppressed. But when you're explaining what it means, you can
just be
use all
a
of the different words that you want. Does that answer your question?
I'm saying like, since that is, we can't put it in that. I really don't.
Yeah, but I think that it's really important.
But I feel like
So I think it's important to say freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, must be demanded by the oppressed. I think you need that whole quotation.
So.
I just said repetition of the right word.
I think this works as your next sentence, but right? Right there, I would put
it is our reputation
So just put.
So I would put from freedom over to the end of the sentence. And then I would say, and then this next sentence works because it's basically where you're explaining
what is.
Okay, so you're saying.
So in order to, I mean, you've got to prove that it is an antithesis. The only way to do that is with the whole
In the sentence. Oh, okay. So then we have the oppressor and oppressed part.
Yeah.
We might just have to talk about.
Is anyone done with this? Ready to move on?
Not yet.
Okay, keep going.
What? Use and laughter. Laughter is the kind of you saw me, you're like, right.
Very.
Did you guys write king rights at the beginning of that, or did you just say it?
So then that's a whole sentence.
What if at the very end, you say, even though the freedom of knowing is never truly, or was, shoot, I had it said.
There you go.
Come on, man, boxing.
Painfully, sometimes, freedom is never truly found by the approach.
You had that really good idea.
What I did.
It was the one about. I don't know.
Wait,
That's your idea.
Freedom is never
Yeah. Something like. You said it like, yeah.
poetically? That did not sound like me. You heard my speech.
Since I've known this man for over a decade, and I haven't heard a single poetic thing out of justice in that whole.
The idea.
I wrote a full.
Okay, I'm just going to tell you the next part and then set you free because the next part is the last part of your paragraph. So I have tried to do a first draft of an analysis now. My board work is backwards. So it starts here. Then it says, using the anaphora here, King repeatedly places a white experience of America in juxtaposition with a black experience. He uses the second person you to demand that his white audience does not see these stories with sympathy and pity, but rather with empathy. He wants them not only to witness the pain of a black community living under Jim Crow laws, but to imagine themselves feeling this pain. He repeats the word when to clarify that each separate instance is inevitable, not optional, in a racist system. The repetition of the phrase conveys a sense of exhaustion, as each anecdote demands more and more emotional investment from the audience. Though through this exhaustion, the audience might feel a part of King's own frustration and his personal and emotional knowledge that his community cannot wait for justice. So what I've done here that I want you to notice is I have picked out the words that I'm quoting, and I have tried to fully examine each word. Now, some of the words in your sentences, like some of your quotes are a little longer than just 2 words. You won't be able to do that with every word, but you can pick out a couple things, a couple words that create the rhetorical strategy you're talking about, and talk about what they mean and the power of those words. The other thing that I want you to notice is how focused I am on the audience. That's the whole point of rhetoric, is to convince an audience of something. So your whole goal is to try and explain why this was a good choice for this audience. And then at the end, I got a little bit into his ultimate argument about this idea of urgency. They cannot wait for justice. So I also at the end said, and this will be good because it's going to reinforce his overarching argument. So at some point in your analysis section, you want to look at details. You want to make sure you're addressing, you're talking about how he addresses the audience, and you want to include something about the overarching argument. Okay, I'm going to let you go for it. I am only going to give you 10 more minutes to write this together, maybe even 7 more minutes. If you don't finish, that's okay, but I want you to work through these problems together. Okay, give it a shot.
Okay. I think I understand. Okay.
I'll take a picture of this. This is a good paragraph.
Right? We do freedom of paragraphs in quotation is never truly known by the press. Quotations and press.
We don't have to
And
quote this.
yes, you do. You do. And then, and
You do want to make sure that our balance
do
is
not
right, so
know
you're
that
not
that's painful experience. They are no longer oppressed.
So we're basically just saying it's just said
Just, do you see how she had one paragraph and then also
Wait, okay.
and
I
had
have to write this down.
twins?
So that we don't forget.
Like,
Okay, Miss Mara?
Yeah.
I actually like because I think that's a really good sentence. I just want to know if it's true.
Okay, I'll be right there.
why?
So
Like, you're like, look what she did.
So we just wrote here on the quote, we said Dr. King writes that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor and it must be demanded. Ben said we should say next to
Okay, so we say freedom is never truly known by the oppressed and is not a peaceful experience until they are no longer oppressed upon. That, yes,
That's
that.
what we're trying to talk about. Yeah, there are no others.
It's so annoying, but I'm like, I'll remember that.
I think
I don't know. I'm trying to decide if that really is.
You know what, my like,
But it is repetition, and that's what we're going to do now.
Display, let's do display because we use.
Yeah, good. I totally agree. I think that that is an implied argument here, which is that so far the oppressed have pretty much stayed kind of with the status quo here, and that part of them wanting to part of the movement being effective is them gaining a kind of consciousness about their own oppression, right? I also think though that there's another argument that is more direct about oppressors not giving in unless they have a lot of demands placed upon them. You know, that's the more, mine is more obvious, but I really like yours, and I think that yours is more powerful for the rest of it.
We can start with that sentence and follow it up with that, like saying, you know, they do not know how it's going to, or they don't understand that they're recipients that never experience not having that painful experience, you know, that thing. So.
This is what life is like for my community.
Yeah.
And now, I think here's the argument. This is what life is like for my community. They are starting to gain that consciousness. They are starting to see that they are oppressed. So you need to recognize that you are the oppressor in that situation. Because you want to keep in mind that his audience is the white moderate. So ultimately, he doesn't have to convince in this letter Black people.
So he's convincing white people.
Yeah.
I also wanted your opinion on this. We said that, you know, because as you saw, we said, you know, it's a call to action to both white and Black audiences. I think he's also trying to say to Black audiences that, hey, it's time to rise up. And so I feel like it's targeted at both white and Black audience because he's saying to whites, like, you guys need to, like, you guys need to stop being oppressors, and he's saying the Black people stop letting them oppress you.
I think that could be a secondary argument, but I also think the protests and everything is on at this point. So Black people are, I mean, at this point, at all points, this point, they're organized.
Oh, yeah,
So I actually think it's more of a threat.
It's just like, it's a very violent state.
He's like, no, lady. There's something coming for you.
Yeah, we should totally say that.
No,
But it's like, where do we go now?
Oh, okay, thank you.
So how the heck do we put that into a
I have
sentence?
an idea.
Okay, what is-
How's it going over here?
We unintentionally.
Add a finishing statement.
Oh, so you feel like I'm dropping my guy, there's nothing left to say.
No, it's just like, it just
I
ends
can't
the
figure out where to
statement.
go.
We got the sentence, guys.
I'm thinking.
Slow pace and
Come on.
This is-
King's argument is that if community is no longer being oppressed on, and they are now aware of their oppression, well, our community has become aware of our oppression from your community's oppression.
Introducing your idea, because now you're going to look at the word justice. Why does he use justice when he's talking about capital laws? He could have said something about segregation. But he's focusing on that. Think about the word delayed and the word denied, and those are not totally opposite.
Your Great Awakening was nothing compared to our Great Awakening.
He sets them up in justice. So think about why he would want us to see the opposite of denied and delayed. And there's the opposite of denied, we have to deny.
Yours is religious, ours was actually justified. Yours just sucks and makes no sense.
Good. Okay, keep going.
Also, you see God loves you now, you do what you're doing to us.
I haven't checked in with you guys really because it just seems like you're doing really well.
So, King says. No, you're good.
I don't know that would feel right. Happy.
I like that idea, this idea of experience, because the insistence on over and over again implies that they also don't know things. They're kind of ignorant. Consequences that follow. Inevitable consequences. We use that word without knowing.
Bringing someone together.
Great minds think like we're all kind of the same. The word they mean the word you.
So I don't want you guys to be on this. I am coming at it more of what I'm saying. But
Awesome.
King conveys those
One little
communities
thing
something of the reality
is,
that
when you use individual words from the quote, just make sure that you have an application. Not only does it make it easier, but it also creates ethos because you're like, I understand this. Now how do we write that?
I have no
The
idea.
last sentence I would do, you have the last sentence saying about the white audience. I would have a last sentence that ties it back into
Is
it.
it estimated because we're
Saying that, oh, yeah, make sure that the white audience now has this perspective. For frustration or whatever we're using.
I don't know how many minutes it has been.
Do someone or something together. I don't think we like straight up like both have that, but now. People, the courtroom and in the community.
Or something. Those are words.
Oh,
Fill the blank.
and by waiting. And as we use this. So many.
I never